a very warm good morning to all of you. We are here today to delve deeper into future ready for impact, the skills that you need to thrive in the social sector. I'm sure this is something that we know, but maybe we don't reflect upon that much about just the sheer size, scale, and impact that this sector drives. Um, Last year, the social sector received funding to the tune of 25 lakh crores. And we are saying that in the coming 5 years, this is going to grow to 45 lakh crores of funding for the sector. We have millions of people engaged in this sector, driving essential impact for the citizens, for the communities. And this, by and large, is one of the most fundamental sectors driving the development for the nation. And as we speak about Viksit Bharat, um, the sector will be one of the pivotal wheels towards that. I must say that we've seen this sector go through changes in the last 3 decades. There's been a wide ranging evolution. We have seen the movement from generic vocational skills to domain specific technical capabilities. We've seen conversations on movement from being having those soft skills, leadership skills, communication skills to having more of systems leadership, more of cross sector collaboration. We are talking more and more about evidence driven decision making. There is a growing demand for impact measurement. We have started talking about impact investing. Post COVID, there's been a surge of digital use for content, digital use for delivering learning and capacity building and skill development and whatnot. And there is an emerging niche of roles that have come about in the space. Whether we talk about ESG, we talk about impact investing, green skills, etc. And it's such an exciting time for the sector. Um, I think delving deeper into this topic of, what are those future ready skills? I could not have asked for better people and co-panelists than Deepam and Aparna today, who have made bold transitions from high-paying corporate careers into the social impact space. They espouse not just a career switch, but a value driven journey. Today, they both co founders of Yellow Spark are at the forefront of helping mission driven organizations build the right leadership and people practices. I'm so looking forward to exploring their own path, understanding what it takes to grow in the development sector as you move from coming as young professionals to the sector to leading and even hiring as managers for the sector. So, a very warm welcome to both of you, Deepam and Aparna. And I hope we have a wonderful conversation ahead. At the
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Looking forward to
okay, great. So let's dive into this exploration. I'd really love to understand when you both began your careers in the corporate sector and later chose to shift into the social impact space, it's not always an easy decision. And there are all kinds of contexts that go around there. What is it that triggered your decision to make the switch from corporate to the development sector? Deepam, if I can tag you in on that.
great, great. So, good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. And just before we started, I was sharing with Kakul that it's lovely because we don't really sit down and reflect on our journeys. And this session has actually made us to sit down and go through all of that, experience that whole thing all over again. So, thank you for that. And in terms of transition, I have a small story to share. So it wasn't just a very random decision, honestly. Um, I started my career in the media advertising industry, so very, very, I would say, vibrant, very, very flashy, if I may use that word. And but our then chairperson, she was very, even then, very thoughtful about the development sector. She actually instigated a 1 month paid leave for a volunteering assignment. So she said, okay, जिसको भी जाना है जाओ, मैं 1 month का paid छुट्टी दूंगी if you really go and volunteer and you come back and you report. And I happened to find out a fellowship, 1 month fellowship program as a volunteer. I went and I worked with the Siddhi Goma tribe in Bhavnagar. I stayed with them in their home, ate the food that they ate, woke up when they woke up, slept when they slept, worked with the community, teaching the children, understanding the women of that community. And actually, that 1 month changed my life forever. You know, it suddenly felt like कहाँ हम मीडिया की दुनिया में हैं, 4 करोड़ 5 करोड़ के मीडिया बजट्स है, and here is this community thriving. It's irrespective of where they are thriving. I mean, there was this whole feeling of fake versus real that I experienced, honestly. And that led to my transition. I came back from that volunteering stint and I went and I spoke to our chairperson of our media agency. She was also the CEO then. And I told her I want to quit my job. I want to go and work in the NGO sector. And she was like, Deepa, are you mad? She's like, I'm for the sector. She herself runs a not for profit organization. So she's like, I'm for the sector. But are you serious? Are you going to, like, you're 6 years into your career, you're young, you're growing in this industry, all your friends will move kahan se kahan, and are you sure you want to do that? But that whole impact was so huge for me, that I was just very sure. I said, it's okay even if I'm making a mistake, but right now this is what I want to do. And yeah, in a slow 3 months transition after that, it took me a while because I had to understand, अच्छा फिर मैं कहाँ job करूँगी, क्या job करूँगी. I just had this thing about I want to move to this sector. That's it. That was somewhere my trigger and my point of okay, बस मुझे करना है. And yeah, but it was really a more like a fake to real kind of a transition in my heart. But yeah, that's how it happened. That's how I actually moved to the development sector, consciously knowing that I might be making a mistake, but well, I was looking forward to that.
Lovely. Aparna, do you have
Right.
any reflection on this?
Lovely. Yes, so for me, the transition was quite by accident, unlike Deepam, who consciously decided to go. I was on a career break, and there was an organization that approached me because they wanted. So I had an HR background. I had about 8 years of HR experience, and they said we've recently grown, so we want to structure the organization and put job descriptions in place. And there's a small HR advisory assignment that had come about there. So then I said it was close to my house. I said, okay, let me explore this. It sounds very interesting. And the thing was, they had transitioned from being a 15, 17 employee organization to 40 employees. For them, that was growth. Okay. But as I started developing the job descriptions, I realized that there is so much depth in every role. Although the size of the organization from a corporate perspective is very small, in the corporate, you say 100, 150 is a small organization.
Yeah.
So, and anything less than that is probably still at a startup stage. That's how we think in the corporate space. But here was an organization that was looking at impacting, having a national impact with 40 youngsters. And they didn't even have the most basic HR structure that you would take for granted in the corporate space. And those 2 months for me were very were the defining moments, because then I said, now that I have done this, now I can't go back to 9 to 5, where you don't know what's happening in the outside world. I just
Yeah.
felt like in the corporate space, I was in a bubble. We were working hard. It was long hours. Of course, I was enjoying my job, no doubt about it. But I just felt like, oh my God, there's so much more to the world which I was missing out on. And now I can't go back to that bubble. I wanted to be in this bigger
That's
open
right.
space where you can see the change actually happening on the ground and that goes really beyond the numbers. So that's what made me stay back in the development sector. That's how I would put it.
Absolutely. As a professional, even I've switched from corporate to a public institution, government anchored institution to the development sector. But as we say, the professionals in this sector are solving for complexities beyond imagination. And numbers
Absolutely.
are just like what we see in corporate, it's so isolated, right, in that space, in that sectoral context. But the efforts that the managers, the professionals in the sector are doing is, as you beautifully put, Aparna, it's the open land and the open context. Um, so tell me, when this shift happened, what were some of the biggest mindset shifts or skill gaps that you experienced as professionals, and that to experienced professionals when you entered the social sector?
Aparna, you want to take that up first? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, mind shifts is so basically, like I was saying, mine was an HR advisory assignments, and it was almost like having a person in HR. So I was still a volunteer, but it just seemed like, oh my God, even if we want to hire a full-time HR person, it's a luxury. So that's a mindset shift change because you just take some of these roles, whether it's HR, whether it's admin, also to a large extent, marketing and communications. These were roles I thought, we take for granted in the corporate space, which is in the social development space, one has to be mindful if they are spending even a penny on these kind of roles. And so many people who work in the sector who are in program roles a lot of times double up for these roles,
Yeah,
which means they go so much beyond what is expected out of there. So there is a core responsibility of managing a project program, people, so on and so forth. And there is also this unwritten expectation or unwritten delivery that they do and a lot of them do it also very proactively of contributing towards other functions like human resources or marketing or any other coordination, event management, all these kind of things. I think those were some of the changes that I saw in terms of the mind shift change. Like if my printer was down, I would just call up in the office and you have a IT desk, and then the IT desk takes note of a ticket, and then your printer will get sorted. And here, one fine day when the printer was not working, I was like, okay, who do I call? I just went around the office and I said, looks like there's nobody who's going to be able to help me. I just have to find this out myself. So those are
yeah.
small but really important things that come and stare at your face in this space. Yeah. Deepam?
Yeah, taking off from what you're saying, Aparna, I think what you're saying, and I would echo that, is that you're somewhat, maybe you feel pampered in the corporate space, maybe because everything is easily available, but in a way that also spoils you, right? You just become so overly dependent on other people. When I shifted to the sector, the first thing that stood out for me was simplicity. You know, everything was simple. It wasn't. We have this perception ना कि बहुत complex है, पता नहीं क्या होगा ये वो ये. Actually, I just experience a great amount of simplicity from the people, from their demeanor, from what do they want to do, how do they want to do it. There was no complication of things. And the second thing, and again that will echo what Aparna is saying, is there was this huge sense of self-reliance. You know,
Yeah,
खुद करना है. You have to be the problem solver here, right? You have to, be ready to do everything that it takes. And by that, it's like, if I have to summarize it, it was more like पहले तो सीखो, okay, फिर करो, you have to do it on your own, and then more people join in, and then you have to teach them also, the सिखाओ, मतलब you have to do everything. Nobody, it's not like in a way, a corporate is a factory, right? When someone joins there, you're expecting they should know this, they should be able to do this. You tell them this is to be done, they'll do it. Here it was very involving, I would say. The stakes automatically go up. Those were my experience. That you're so involved into it कि फिर उससे distance रख के आप काम नहीं कर सकते. So you become very involved. There's a huge sense of self-reliance, and there's a huge sense of you have to be ready to go all out and do everything that it. I think those were some changes that I observed when I moved from the corporate. And again, remember that I've come from media and advertising, and that's a very different animal. And from there straight into the sector. So yeah, those were some very humbling experiences for me, and yeah.
Absolutely. In fact, Deepam, Aparna, building on what you said, when if I reflect back, like you said, simplicity and self-reliance. I think we would always talk about having this entrepreneurial kind of a mindset in corporate. Like we need people to be more entrepreneurial, think about problem solving. But that's day-to-day context in the social sector.
Mm, absolutely.
And and from that aspect, the skills of an entrepreneurial mindset, to kind of go सीखो करो
Yeah.
आगे बढ़ो challenges हो गए पर आगे बढ़ो. The other thing that I just if I have to reflect that really stuck with me is the sense of agency and the voice, agency for self and agency for your team. And
Yes.
people are बहुत simple तरीके से, but people are very good with the agency and very good in reflecting that agency.
Yes.
I think, yeah, that's another thing, but that's wonderful. I mean, at ISDM also we get many questions and reflections, but many young professionals are curious about entry level or mid career transitions into the sector. Maybe entry level experiences are different, mid career transitions into the sector are different. From your vantage, your own experiences, as well as maybe what you've seen, what do you think they should be prepared for?
I would say that the first thing that they need to be prepared for is to be able to toggle their pace, you know. While matlab, it's not consistent, it's not steady. Sometimes you will need to speed up, sometimes you will need to slow down. Yeah, sometimes you need to really zoom in, sometimes you'll have to like really zoom out कि यार नहीं हो रहा है, क्यों नहीं हो रहा है, तो अच्छा let's look at it from a distance. So I think you have to be really ready to toggle your pace irrespective आप entry level पे हो, आप mid level पे हो, आप senior position join कर रहे हो, unless you develop that, I think it becomes very challenging to be able to see through things, you know. um, I think the second thing that comes to my mind is to really understand your role. Okay, so ये ना मुझे एक कंप्लेन है इन जनरल विद ऑल ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, कॉर्पोरेट हो या एनजीओ हो, कि वी कम अप विद वेरी फैंसी डेजिग्नेशंस, बट एक्चुअली रोल क्या है, that is important to understand. You can't make a contribution unless you're extremely clear about what is it that I'm expected to do. And like Aparna was saying some time back, that in this sector you end up doing more than the thing that is written for you as your designation, right?
True.
So it's not so much about what's my designation on paper, but what's the role that I'm required to play in this organization. It you really have to do that. Like, I can share another experience that when I joined the not for profit that I joined, I had joined in their marketing communications team. And when I joined, there was nobody to give me a handover. There were people before me, but there was no handover, right? Which we take for granted in corporate. कि अच्छा कुछ तो मिलेगा, some files somewhere we'll get. There was no handover. There was one other person with me in my team who had joined 1 month back, and now she was to report into me. So you can imagine the scenario in which we jumped in. But of course, this is like almost 1.5 decade ago. I'm sure the organizations have come a long way from there. But if you don't take the ownership for understanding your role, you half the battle is lost there. So I think you
Yeah.
really need to know how to toggle your pace. You need to understand your role really well, irrespective of hierarchy. I think the sector is very hierarchy agnostic. Doesn't matter. But yeah, I would say these are the two main things for people to keep in mind. And I'm sure Aparna will add more important ones.
No, I think from a mindset and from being ready to join the sector, what Deepam said is absolutely bang on. One has to really adjust to what they're seeing and not just be, keep a fixed mindset. Okay, this is how today I will do this, tomorrow this decision will be taken, day after this will get executed. It may not go at that pace, and one really has to adjust. I think that's the point she was driving. If I have to look at the recruitment side or more the process side on how hiring really happens, I think nonprofits are extremely mindful when they have to hire. They want to hire fast, but they will take their time to select the right candidate, if I have to put it in a very, very simple manner. So it's not just, okay, I've sent the CV, I have done 3 rounds of interviews. And if I've kind of reached the third round of interview or so called the final round of interview, I'm going to get hired and, I'll start probably a month and then the offer will come and whatever. There's a lot that happens in between in the nonprofit space. So nonprofits, because they're accountable for every penny that they spend, because it's, they have to show every expense. They also realize that a cost of a wrong hire is going to
True.
prove to be very expensive, not just in terms of monetary, but also the impact on the project and what they actually want to achieve. Because there is a lot of planning that happens. Hiring just doesn't happen because okay, somebody resigned, now I'm replacing. There is a clear planning, budgeting process from where manpower projections come in and from where hiring gets initiated. So there are a lot of levels of filtering that happens through assessments. There are, for example, one of the organizations that we've been working with very, very closely has a policy of where the person, irrespective of the role, is sent on the field, spends a day on the field, is expected to come back, write a report, submit the report. If that person is selected at that level, present that report to at least 1 or 2 board members. Now, this is, I don't think at a mid junior level, anybody ever meets a board member in the corporate space. That doesn't happen. But that's the beauty of the development sector, that's the opportunity that is available to you. But you really have to stick around. You can't get bored of the process. People will do that for a Google, but people will not do that for a slightly smaller private limited kind of a company, right? But in the development sector, irrespective, they will have their assessment and they will follow the process. They will do their filtering and only then join. So people have to be ready to. They might say, but I have 8 years of experience. Why am I, being made to give a maths test or an aptitude test or a psychometric assessment? I've already proved myself in the corporate space. But success in the corporate space doesn't equal to success in the development space. So they
Yeah.
will have their filters. And I think every person who aspires to join the sector should enjoy that journey. Use it as a point of reflection. If I have to be in this environment, would I enjoy doing that? And parallelly also make a decision of transitioning. I think it's a beautiful journey. I think if people are exploring it, there's already that small spark that they already have. It's about, I think, igniting it further as they kind of, go ahead in that decision.
I
Absolutely.
wanted to add one or two more points to that. I mean,
Sure, Deepa.
while Aparna was speaking, that came to my mind is one is that, you know, when we are in the corporate space, we feel like कि हाँ मुझे आता है, and we're not open to being questioned. But that's one thing that everybody must keep in mind. You come into this sector, everything is going to be questioned. It's not taken for granted. Your years of experience, your previous projects that you've done, it it's there, great, but everything that you speak, every idea that you give will be questioned, not to demean you or tell you that, okay, you don't know it, but because everything is done so thoughtfully that unless everything is questioned, they will not be able to put every single penny to good use. Okay, so you have to be ready to be questioned. You know, कई बार हमने देखा है then they feel कि like a पढ़ना से मुझे क्यों पूछा जा रहा है ये? You know, I mean, you should know that I know it. Sorry, but you know, we want to be sure. So these
Yeah,
questions will be asked. You have to be open to that. And I think you need very strong planning and prioritizing skills. Okay. You
true.
suddenly, you're working on a project, something happens, another project becomes priority. You will have to just jump ship. And you have to really be able to do that. Yeah. Um, One example came to my mind that a client of ours was had a 20 people team that was running a certain kind of a helpline, and suddenly the government decided to pull that project out. Yeah. And now you have 20 people over there. You the organization had to repurpose these 20 people. So imagine those 20 people. वो एक role में थे. Now they have to change the role only. And the
Yeah,
sector is very protective of each other. No, they will not just say, हाँ okay, lay off है, चलो 20 जन को निकाल दो. नहीं. So
yes.
thinking from the perspective of those 20 people, they really needed to be agile. They needed to be adaptive. They needed to be able to replan, reprioritize. So I think these are some realities of the sector that people who are really keen to jump in here need to be aware of.
Absolutely. You know, in fact, we've kind of segued into, the first set of reflections were around your own journey when you came as employees or part of the workforce of the sector. And now you've kind of been through a journey and kind of looking at it from a leadership lens, internal leadership lens. So, from being employees, you have grown into leadership roles, hiring, mentoring, managing teams in nonprofit and mission led spaces. So, would love to understand what are those leadership skills that are most critical when one is growing inside the development sector organization?
Uh, I think, development sector organizations are very strongly driven by a purpose and a passion. So as somebody, and frankly, of course, there is some bit of hierarchy because there's a founder, there is a very strong vision with which that person has actually initiated a project or an organization in the nonprofit space. But it's not enough for that person to be passionate. They have to literally pass on that passion and that inspiration to the others, gather like-minded people who are willing to work for the same cause with the same energy, with the same passion. So inspirational management, I would say, stays right at the top. And the beauty of the development sector is when you join, especially if it's an organization that's already running and has already some people as part of it, you'll see that inspiration running from the top to the bottom and across. Everybody is passionate about the same cause, and which is what has probably brought them together to work. So I would say, from a leadership skills perspective, being that inspiration to everybody around you, irrespective of your level and designation, is really, really important. Number one. The other roles automatically become things like, be having a collaborative mindset, because you have to collaborate with sometimes the community, sometimes with donor organizations, sometimes with other departments, sometimes you're partnering with another NGO who might be working for a slightly different kind of a cause, or may have a slightly different kind of a vision. But collaborating with all these different stakeholders and mindset becomes that much more. So if I have to give you a simple example of, say, somebody who is leading a fundraising team, okay, say heading the fundraising function, just for the sake of discussion. And so this person is responsible to ensure that they go to the field, they pick up the success stories, okay, and they put it in a well articulated manner in front of another stakeholder who's a donor, who might be, or a CSR foundation, where you're entering a nice swanky corporate office, sitting in a fancy boardroom, and then you're talking about a story that's from the field. So imagine the kind of skills this person needs to have. One is engaging with people from the ground, because they may not They are concerned with doing work on the ground, but picking up that story, taking it into a fancy corporate office, communicating that story, and then adding more stakeholders. And so, at that level, ability to adjust with different kinds of people, mindsets, uh, you know, being extremely patient, because if you may be used to a very fast paced environment, but people are going to take their time to open up unless you build a trust. They are not going to, disclose to you. So, building trust, engaging with, communicating with different types of people, and being extremely patient. I would say some of these skills would really be right at the top when you are working in this space, at the leadership level at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Deepam, would you add on to this?
Yes, and a slightly different perspective, and I think कि काफी, I wouldn't use the word pressure, वो गलत हो जाएगा, but there's a lot of expectation from the person who is in a leadership role in a not-for-profit organization. And if I look at it from the team perspective, it's this leader's role to then be able to structure a team, to be able to envision everybody's role. Okay. um, तो बहुत प्रोसीजरल साउंड करता है ना, अच्छा उनका रोल स्ट्रक्चर करो, उनसे explain karo what they need to do. But the bigger task is when you get somebody into that role.
Yeah.
Okay, now let me give an example and maybe that be more clear. So say for example a website developer. Yeah, आजकल सबकी websites है, all organizations have website. Now a website developer, when you tell them I want to make a website for a not-for-profit organization, for them the, like, they don't have a understanding only कि क्या करना है. They have built websites for products, brands, जहाँ पे sales important होता है, right? Now from there they need to make a website for an organization where maybe the mission is more important, maybe getting a volunteer is more important, right? So to explain that, now to get the work done from this person is also a very very critical task that rests with the leadership team here. So it's not only envisioning my team, identifying their roles, but being able to guide them to deliver on their skill. So skill बहुत है हमारे country में, but to help them deliver on that skill becomes a very key role for the leader in that sense. You really need to help them. You'll have to keep them motivated also. That's another point I wanted to add, that बहुत जल्दी team members, that there's a ebb and flow like everything else, and in some roles you get so distant from the cause that it's possible that team members feel कि यार मुझे नहीं समझ में आ रहा है मेरा क्या contribution है to this cause.
Yeah,
But to be able to help them see that how what they're doing is really contributing to the cause, is really the role that the leader needs to play. Because at the end of the day, everything is about people
that's right.
and
That's
their
right.
motivations. And when they feel good about what they're doing, is when they will do better. So, yeah, I think those are some more points that I'd like to add to this.
No, Deepam, absolutely so bang on. In fact, at ISDM, when we do our program, we have an inherent course which is on personal mastery and development leadership, which kind of talks about so many elements you both have referred to. Because the alignment of the head, heart, and hand
Yes.
across the organization and partnership landscape is so important. We've all heard of these words where they say that social change and social impact transcends the boundary of the organization. The mission is forever, in the sense like it outlives the leader, it outlives the organization in some case.
Yes.
I know of some leaders in the sector who's who kind of talk about, and they've been running these organizations, community based organizations, for the last 40, 50, 60 years, and so passionate about it, but they have ridden the change and growth and kind of aligning everyone to that vision, the mission, the purpose, with the right set of stakeholders, with the right set of partners, on the spread of it or the depth of it becomes extremely, extremely challenging. So yes, totally echo what you've said. And we keep talking about this thing about systems lens, and it's so important because every single time we kind of say that the change is the only constant in the sector.
Yes, yes.
It's forever. So as leader, you're being agile in managing and leading that change for yourself as a leader, for your team members, enabling them to be change managers and others to kind of stay on the path of that purpose. Okay, so when at Yellow Spark, your responsibility actually before Yellow Spark also, when your responsibility evolved in the not-for-profits where you were associated, you started hiring and building teams internally. What was the experience there? What did you see as the key skills? And going back to this larger ambit of the question, what were those essential skills? What were those systemic things that were required when you were hiring for the not for profits?
Um, I think I would repeat a little of what I just said, that, being able to structure. So, being able to plan, being able to envision, these are all skills. And let me say that ये skills थी नहीं, डेवलप करनी पड़ी. So I
Yeah.
think the biggest responsibility shift was, okay, what is it that I'm not able to do right now, and to first say, acha, I think I need to learn this myself, and then be able to implement it. Ki, okay, I maybe I'm not good at understanding how my team should be structured, and when you're talking about structure, and since you're saying systemic thinking, everything had to align, even with costs and budgets.
Yeah.
We couldn't do it in isolation of that. कि अच्छा ये ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की विजन क्या है, हमारे पास कितना बजट है. Okay, maybe I have
True.
budget only for 2 people. Now a marketing function can be so many things. Now how do I align the budget that I have, and how do I break the role of so many things in marketing into 2 people, and then how do we function as a 3 people team? So this whole thing about the iterative process, it's very very iterative in the not-for-profit sector. Like, you will feel कि क्या ये सही है, क्या ये सही है. You will need to explore options to really optimize. So I would say responsibilities of being responsible for the money, responsible for what is that is needed at this moment, going very systematically from year to year. So again, I think planning, prioritizing, envisioning, being responsible for the money being spent, and in a good way. I don't mean to say that there's a dearth of money, but to be able to use it responsibly. I think these were some of the experiences, and a lot of self-learning is
Yeah.
what I experienced, was needed at that time for me.
Yeah. Aparna, would you like to add anything further to this?
Yeah, I think quite a evolution that happens, when you're in that non-profit environment, and uh, some of the very smaller things also. So that in the corporate space, you're so used to saying, okay, the sometimes the tasks are very broken down on a daily basis. This is your daily target. This much should be done in this much time. Uh, you may be able to do it also in the non-profit space, but not necessarily that will be achieved, right? So sometimes when you're pulling up people, you've got to be so mindful. There could be a challenge due to which, or suddenly there was a strike, or you didn't expect some festival to be there in the community, which is why a task couldn't be done or is not going to be done for the next 1 week, and it can really throw your planning off guard. So some of these things also you have to be prepared for, like uncertainties, unexpected changes that you were expecting A to happen, but B happened. Now from here, how do you explore things further? So constantly being in that solution driven mode, you know, saying that instead of getting upset about something, saying, okay, fair enough, this is where we are. From here, how is it that we can move forward, and taking people with you. Uh, I think that kind of these are the things that kind of shape the way you function, which might not happen in the corporate space. For corporate space, you it's like, ये करना था, ये क्यों नहीं हुआ? I don't care what the reason was. It just should have been done. You can't take that approach here. It will not fly in this space. So you have to be there in that moment, take a decision that will help you take to the next step, and then from there keep taking steps forward. I think that evolution was very, very important in this sector.
So, in a way to stitch it together, Deepam and Aparna, if I have to ask you your own leadership skills or leadership styles, how, what was the shift, how you were in the corporate and now how you are in the social sector? If I have to ask, let's say, any key reflections on that.
For me, I think when I started having a team, I think I became very reflective and introspective, which I don't think, and again, it's my assumption because I never went back to the corporate. So it's my assumption ki if I were there, I wouldn't have the space to be able to do that. So for everything from like the way we would assess people, कि उनकी performance ही कैसे evaluate होती है, right? वो everything changed
Yeah.
drastically. There's a huge amount of sensitivity that you develop, to the situation, to the people, towards the cause, towards your team, and you operate from that space. And I think for me, the journey was very, very reflective. And I think if I have to jargonize it, I mean, I don't even know if this exists, but it was a very reflective leadership style, more about first, okay, let me see myself, and then let me see what next. I think that's how I evolved into a person, and it's been extremely life changing for me. Yeah, that's what I would say it was.
Lovely. I think, I would say most commonly we relate a designation with leadership.
Yeah.
Manager, somebody who's a vice president, somebody who's a VP, roles like that are associated as leadership roles. And other roles may not be leadership roles. Now, that's not how our space functions in the nonprofit sector. For us, you could have, for example, one of the organizations that we work with, they work with community leaders. So they have people from the community who are leaders and who come and sit with different departments from the organization, program teams rather, from the organization. And then there is a lot of exchange of dialogue. So you really see diversity inclusion, which is there at the policy level in action in this sector. So one has to be ready to accept what the point of view is coming to you, which you may have never been exposed to, of what, for example, living conditions might be, say in a rural slum, which you may not be exposed to ever. You may have heard of things, but when you sit with people from the community, when sometimes you yourself have to make field visits, it's a different experience altogether. I knew about it, but now I have an experience associated with the knowledge that I had. It's not just in your mind, it's an experience that you've really taken in. So I think that starts really changing your leadership style. There are a lot of younger people who are leaders, I think, in this space, and they don't wait to be told. They just, I remember when I told you about my journey, how I started with the corporate space, rather with the development space. Sorry, it's so one of the things that this organization, I was developing job descriptions, and somebody with 0 to 2 years of experience was going to be given a manager designation. And my first learning was, so my first argument with the founder was, how can you make somebody who doesn't have experience a manager? Isn't a manager supposed to be experienced in managing teams, managing people? A fresher can't be a manager. So I was really stuck in that for some time. It took me some time to realize. Then one fine day, the person told me, look, this is the person, this is what the role does. And then I was able to relate to how this person, even if the person doesn't have experience, is actually managing,
Yeah.
not just by designation, but by action. actually talking to people, getting things done, moving resources around, handling budgets, making reports, presenting those reports, that's actually managing and
Absolutely.
mobilizing people at the same time. So that is how then your leadership style and your mindset starts changing, and it's been wonderful. I think it's very humbling, it makes you very sensitive. I think Deepam also covered some of these words before, but there's really no other way to put it. It is humbling. You become very, very sensitive. It moves you in a very different way, and that's how your leadership style kind of keeps on evolving as you move ahead.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
you're no more driven by what you wear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's There was a very interesting social experiment that was done about this little girl. I'm sure people might have seen those videos floating around, where there's a girl who is very well dressed and she's looking like she's lost, and how people approach to help her. And the same girl, when she's not dressed very well, nobody even bothers to go and ask her what happened. That's how leadership is. It's very external. It's very, okay, this person is suited booted, means this person must be a very senior leader in the organization. But in the development space, the most senior person might be extremely simple, and you might just not even sometimes notice this person unless that person starts talking, because the experience starts coming out, and that's what kind of moves you. So leadership has a very different definition, I think. And I'm sure even at the corporate level, at the very senior level, sometimes people do understand these things. But I always see a mismatch in the way leaders are defined in reality. So yeah, I just
No,
wanted to
Aparna,
touch upon that.
that's a wonderful point you have made. I think also this sector gives that opportunity to truly, irrespective of tenure, how many years you have kind of spent, to really kind of fire, ignite, Deepam, using your word, and spark that leadership skill. Because whether it is making decisions, whether it is moving seamlessly across very different stakeholders, community to policy to decision makers to funders to markets, your seamless movement across such diverse people, issues, it just really gives you an amazing platform to truly be a leader from the beginning of your professional journey in that context and kind of ignite that further.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and that's why 100% it's not the title. It's like the work that you're doing.
Yeah, Kakul, may I add something there? Now that
Sure,
you're
Deepa.
saying this, it's just something that's emerging to me now. Is that, there was no, like in the corporate space, you will never get that comfort. But in the not for profit space, there was no shame in making mistakes.
Yeah,
you know so in the corporate space you're like acha aap to leadership position mein ho, aap to team manager ho, you're a VP, you're a CEO, you're blah blah blah. How could this thing have gone through under your nose and you didn't realize it? But I think there was no shame in making mistakes in the development sector, and I think because of that we end up being more responsible for the decisions that we are making. Okay, but it's not the same with the corporate world in that sense. Like there's a whole lot of unrealistic expectations attached, unreal, like unhuman expectations attached from the person who you label as a leader. So I think that pressure gets taken off,
yeah,
but at the cost of that pressure being taken up, we are all becoming more responsible leaders. I think that was another experience that I felt that it's okay, make mistakes, and it allowed me to be comfortable with the team making mistakes.
yes,
ठीक है यार गलती होती है, you know you don't have to pull them up for everything that they do incorrectly or every mistake that they make, right? The focus was more on अच्छा गलती हो गई तो अच्छा next time हम क्या करेंगे ताकि ये गलती ना हो.
that's
That was another very मतलब strong and visible shift that happened, and I observed that of the sector, because now as Yellow Spark we work both with the consulting with the development sector as well as with corporate clients, and the what do you call, the two visuals are so starkly different on certain parameters that you can't help but notice that these differences stand out.
Would love to reflect more on this in this next series of reflections, Deepam. Thank you for that. With Yellow Spark, like you said, you're supporting organizations in hiring senior leadership like CEOs, COs, culture builders. Um, you've seen how critical the right hire is to the mission success of the organization. So, as you have been doing this, what do you think makes or defines a great leadership candidate in the social sector today?
I think in the corporate sector also, maybe definition wise the definition is same, okay, because a leader is a leader, right? And I think the biggest difference is that you don't, I'm taking from what Aparna was saying, that you don't label a certain designation or a role as a leader. Everybody is a leader in the development sector is what I feel first and foremost. And for a person to be that, you need to be able to take initiative. I think that's one important thing. Anybody who takes initiative is a leader in the development sector. But again, it's not enough to take initiative. You should have the resilience to see things through. I think so that initiative coupled with resilience is a very, very strong leadership skill or an attitude that you should develop. That's one. I think in the true sense, being able to listen and really listen. Like, है कुछ डेवलपमेंट सेक्टर में भी लोग हैं जो अभी भी मे बी विद सो मेनी इयर्स ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस आर नॉट एबल टू लिसन दे डू अ लॉट मोर स्पीकिंग okay, so listening is a very delicate skill and it takes effort to develop it, but if you have that, I mean, it really changes the kind of leadership that you bring to the sector. So I think those are one or two very, very important things. And some things you can develop, like you can develop learning, uh, finance. You can develop learning skills of, what are the other laws and things like that. So you need to be on top of your game, I think, when you come here. You need to know the sector, you need to understand the works of it. But these are things that you can learn. Everybody can learn. So I don't think that's required for someone to be in a leadership role in the sector. But certainly listening and the ability to be resilient, I think, are two key things that I would add over here. Aparna, you want to share any examples over here for them to get a better? We do interact with a lot of leaders from the development sector, and I think these are two things that stand out most for me. But Aparna?
Aparna, you're on mute.
Sorry. Okay. So, what I've also seen is, organizations where leaders are very adaptable. They find solutions. Like when the whole COVID had hit, um, an organization that was working very closely on the with the communities on the field was suddenly not able to venture out at all. And at that time, I think the leadership skills for, of course, across all sectors were put to test, not just for the development sector, but specifically in this sector, they had to really hold people together. And how they, moved from actually being an organization that was implementing something on the ground to actually saying, okay, now let's do more of distribution and let's look at what is the need of the hour. The need of the hour was at that time that the communities didn't have access to food, didn't have access to medicines. So can we do drives to ensure that people are getting the essentials while the society is able to manage? Not all strata of society has access to that. Can we? So they, for larger good, this leader was able to switch gear and say, you know what, yes, I have this passion and I have this vision to do work on the ground, but that's not possible. So should I just shut shop? Well, not really. Let me now get into this whole distribution thing, which was never done by this organization before. The founder didn't have any experience, but putting that entire plan together, reworking on the roles, assigning those roles to people and saying, okay, now you will do this, you will do this, getting the clearances for them to move around the city, etc., kind of happened. But that all happened in very short time because, you know, COVID had hit hard and it had hit overnight also. So if they had to sustain and they had to move ahead and still do larger good, they had to adapt to that circumstance and take the organization, with him. In this case, there was a person who was leading this organization. So there were a lot of these kind of success stories that happened during COVID in this space. Suddenly, I think this whole thing about people who are we added a new word to the vocabulary. I'm just trying to recall that, where we said, uh, not coming to my mind right now, but there's a new word which was coined for people who were actually doing back end work, but now had come to the forefront, like your healthcare workers, people who are distributing food across, or people who are managing all the emergency services and so on and so forth. So I think that adaptability at that time became a very critical skill. And it continues to be because the tech landscape keeps on changing. So,
Yeah.
there are avenues available to NGOs which didn't exist before, but they also need to know that those avenues are available to kind of go there. For example, retail fundraising. It's a very new age thing. Anybody who wants to set up a retail fundraising unit, or maybe get into this whole space of online donations, needs to understand tech very well, needs to understand guidelines around how RBI allows funds to flow from A to B. What are the clearances that are required, how will it get integrated into the website, how will actually what will motivate a person to actually make that transaction, so on and so forth. So adaptability is, I think, a very important skill that is also evolving in this age thanks to technology.
I would add
So
interpersonal skills to it too. You know, हम as a world इतना solo की तरफ transition करते जा रहे हैं that if you
Yeah.
don't have very strong interpersonal skills, um, I think you'd be missing a very huge pie of the skill that you need to have as a leader. You know, to be able to. So very recently we were in another city and we'd gone there to conduct training, and the training was with a whole host of team people, and their CEO had also traveled. Of course, this is a not-for-profit organization. They work with women empowerment and community leadership, and there was a new joinee in the organization, and over breakfast the new joinee was sitting in a conversation with the CEO, and the new joinee only had things to say that this is not working out, this is not how this is, so in a way a lot of venting was happening, but the patience with which the CEO listened to her, okay, and provided her solutions is unimaginable. So a 45-minute breakfast, like I can't imagine a corporate CEO sitting down with a new joinee, trying to listen to their concerns, to really listen and say, okay, I understand, and it's okay, I'm not putting pressure on you that you have to do this fast. ठीक है, you take your time, आप दोबारा सोचो, you do it properly, no problem, and to patiently listen through that, it just brought about like this strong realization ki bhai, without interpersonal skills, without listening, you can't be an effective leader in this sector. It will be very, like, it'll really leave a huge gap if you don't have that.
so true. Thanks for sharing that, Deepam. Um, on that front, in your experience, how do you assess the alignment between the personal purpose and the organization's culture during hiring? We have established this is one of the critical things, the mission alignment. But how does one assess that?
Aparna, that's your area of expertise, hiring and recruitment. I'll let you take it.
Yeah, so basically, when you're assessing, so this has two parts to it, right? One is the personal purpose, and the other is the organizational culture. So one is to first understand what the culture of the organization is. And when you say culture, it's a very difficult animal to define because there is no definition per se of culture. But what we try and understand, at least at Yellow Spark when we are recruiting, is that we look at, okay, what is the lingo, what are the jargons that are being used, what is the interpretation of those words in action, right? What are some of the things that are just non-negotiable? This will just not fly with us. Like these are the kind of terms that sometimes organizations use with us when they want to hire people. Look, get us someone like this, but somebody who's like this will just not fly with us, for example. So what are the non-negotiables for the role? What are some of the cultural nuances of the organization? So cultural nuances of the organization could also be where there is a very open dialogue with people from the senior management, and using that opportunity very well is very important, because sometimes if you overstep or if you are not able to be at par with the person you're interacting with, that engagement is not going to work out, that relationship is not going to work out, because the mindsets are very different. So we look at mindsets on either side. When you come to the candidate side, what is important for us and what we look at is, what is it that this person holds close as achievements? Is it just driven by hard objective? I achieved X million dollars and X million, or I was in X geographies, etc., etc. And really deep diving into what was the person's role while achieving that. Because what happens is, you may have achieved a lot in your career, but every achievement goes beyond the individual. Sometimes the system is also allowing them to do that because they have access to certain resources, or there's somebody who's given them direction at every step at the execution. So we look at whether the role is an independent role, or whether the direction is going to be given, and therefore is there a match? Will this person need to be handheld, or will this person work independently? So these are some of the nuances that we sort of also look at when we are interviewing candidates. The other thing that we also look at is, what is this person's vision for the role that this person is getting into? So you're going to be head of finance in this organization. What do you think your role is going to be? What would you do as a finance professional with 10, 15 years of experience differently in this organization? Because finance is finance in every setup. But in this particular organization, it might need a different approach because of maybe the way they've been functioning, or the way their cash flows are, or so on and so forth. So what is their vision? And does that align with vision of the organization? Also becomes that much more important. The other thing is, what are the non-negotiables for the candidate? What kind of people do you like working with, and what kind of people in your previous careers haven't worked for you? What kind of environments have you found to be difficult work environments or toxic work environments? Are you somebody who knows how to balance between your personal life, professional life, and meet the demands of the job, be available when you're required to be available, right? Have they worked in a similar setup before? And like I said previously, a lot of organizations I see in the nonprofit space using different assessment techniques. They are not only dependent on interviews. They do panel interviews, for example. So it's not a one-on-one interview. I might be a candidate who's sitting with 4 different people. So they bring different perspectives and then ask questions, and they tag team with each other. So whether that's going to go down very well, whether this person is a team player or not. I know some organizations who involve their team in recruiting. So the hiring manager might be comfortable hiring a certain person, but this person is going to have a team of, say, 6, 7 people reporting into him or her. Will this team align to this individual? So they'll let the team and this potential candidate maybe spend half a day or work together on an assignment, and they will take feedback from the team members.
Yeah.
While I have my own assessment of this candidate, what are your observations? Do you see yourself working with this person long term?
Yeah.
With one of the organizations where I personally was working, one of the most important things I used to look at is, so we had a very fun work environment. So everybody had different roles, but the lunchroom was one place where even if it was the CEO, we would kind of pull his leg,
True.
and the same would happen with others. So if there is a new employee, I would look at, okay, if this person is sitting in the lunchroom, will this person align and just, not get intimidated and also join the fun rather than feel threatened or feel stressed about the work environment? So
True.
these are unique ways in which you try to do your own fitment, and you draw from experiences that you've had with the organization and with the candidate, and you see whether there's a match before you sort of really present the candidate forward. So these are
Absolutely.
some of the things that we do.
Aparna, just building on to what you shared from the lens of more hard skills now. Have
Hmm.
you seen any changes in the asks from the organization on specific skills, let's say post-COVID era over the last 5, 6 years? Is there any specific hard skill or domain or functional skill that has come in? We did refer to technology, we did refer to that, but any observations on that?
I would say that it's very role specific. So
Okay.
some of those skills are very, very role specific because they are driven by a certain purpose of the role. So most organizations would focus on what the core responsibility of this individual is, and what are therefore the hardwired skills required for that role, and also parallelly look at what are the soft skills required for that role. So, for example, if there is a role which involves a lot of report writing and analysis, has this person handled data, sometimes even data warehousing? Because when data comes from the field, it may not come in a nice fancy Excel with very well in a very well presented format.
Yeah,
So in one of the rules, we realized that the person was like, okay, the data just comes to me from the field. Sometimes there are errors in the data. You have to go back to the person who's filled the form to get a little clarity and then sort of move ahead. So these nuances are not written in the job description. These are nuances that you have to engage in a conversation first with the hiring manager and then with the candidate and find out that, because you take some of these things for granted, in the for-profit space, but that may not be the case in non-profit. So understanding those nuances becomes very critical.
yeah, yeah, true. Deepam, anything you want to add to this?
I actually was just making notes, and because you mentioned COVID, and that's triggered just two very basic points. They seem very basic, but I think that the ability of people to be able to work with technology, I think that's a new demand from people, right? To be able to understand Zoom, Google Meet, workspaces, etc., etc. And other on the softer side is for people to be able to work without supervision or
Yeah,
more independently. I think ये दो चीजें अब हम it's a new thing that we started checking in people. These didn't exist in the pre-COVID times. You know, it was okay if you didn't know laptop नहीं use करते हो तो ठीक है, but now it's a given that you need to have these two very critical things.
absolutely. That's so very true. Um, and just building on that, are there any common hiring mistakes that you have seen organizations make? And specifically in the context of hiring from outside the sector, hiring from outside the thematic, anything like that?
I think कि sometimes ना NGOs get very enamored with very flashy CVs. कि इनका CV बहुत अच्छा है, इसमें देखो so many things are there. They work with this big organization, this big brand. So I think they get very enamored. I think that's one mistake we've seen. The other thing that we've experienced is focusing too much on the skill and not the attitude.
Yeah,
So I know today we are talking about skill, but skill is not going to function if you don't have the right attitude to work in a certain space, right? So I think too much emphasis on the skill. कि अच्छा, again I would go back to very technical thing कि वेबसाइट डेवलपमेंट ले लो या फिर डिजाइन ले लो. ठीक है, किसी को डिजाइनिंग करने आता है, बट डू दे हैव द एप्टीट्यूड एंड एटीट्यूड टू अंडरस्टैंड द सेंसिटिविटी विद विच द डिजाइनिंग नीड्स टू बी डन,
yeah,
or the way the website needs to be developed for this, and are you open to even learning that इसको शायद अलग तरीके से बनाना पड़ेगा. whether that
Yeah.
attitude is there. So skill, you are maybe 100 on 100, but without the attitude, I think that's a mistake that we've seen. Another one that stands out is, again, Aparna spoke quite a bit about cultural alignment, but sometimes the not-for-profit sector hires someone who aligns a lot with their leadership, but may not necessarily align with their juniors,
Yeah.
or the rest of the team, or sometimes the field team. And
Yeah.
in fact, one of our clients, they had a CEO, was fabulous, had solid alignment with the board, knew exactly what the organization wanted, had like years of experience, was strategically extremely sharp, but just could not adjust to the mindset of the rest of the team. And both the team, in fact, all three, the organization, the team, and the CEO, all the three parties struggled. And I think they lost a good 2 years of work because of this, trying to make that adjustment happen. So I think these actually stand out. And another thing that stands out for me is the fact that, and Aparna, you can pitch in there, that sometimes they, and I think you mentioned it before, that sometimes they expect ki someone with 8 years should take on a leadership role. So they should have strategy experience, and the compensation, and probably all this thing happens because the compensation is a slightly at a lower level, right? So you're saying 10 lakhs maybe. Sorry, someone's unmuted, I think, by mistake. Yeah. But repeating that, sometimes they expect that, with less years of experience, you'll be able to deliver a much more higher value that the organization needs. And I think ये कुछ mismatches हो जाते हैं. Nothing that cannot be ironed out, but yeah, some of these things kind of stand out as mistakes.
Aparna, you want to add on to this?
I can just add one more point, which I see very commonly happening nowadays. A lot of organizations are very, I used to see CV in a very old style manner, which is they feel, okay, if somebody has 8 years of experience, then person should have worked with at least one organization for 4 to 5 years. So
Yeah.
two organizations in 8 years, or three organizations in 8 years. But what has happened in the last, I think, 7 to 8 years, especially around COVID and maybe a little before that, it started before that and then it became a respectful thing after that, was the whole gig workers.
Yeah.
People taking up small jobs and assignments, freelancing.
Yeah.
So this whole mindset around, oh, this person has experience, maybe has, age-wise also is, they say in their mid 30s, has about 10-12 years of experience, but is a freelancer. उसको ना experience नहीं है, उसने freelance किया है. So there we have to say, but freelance is also work, it's also project. In fact, there you're handling everything independently, right from pitching, showcasing your work, winning a project, delivering on milestone, recovering your own monies, so on and so forth, right? So that is one mindset I think that needs to change. That sometimes people say, oh, this person has jumped too many jobs. Now, job jumps, unlike before, can be for many, many reasons. It could be because of a work environment previously that was extremely toxic. It could be because the organization wasn't ready to kind of induct this person really well. It could be because maybe this person didn't perform in a particular job. So there could be many reasons for a person who has jumped jobs. So being patient enough to kind of deep dive into aspects of why somebody has changed, and are you equipped to absorb a person like that and give them the direction they probably didn't receive before? So some of these things, so moving towards the mindset of I want a ready-made person in this job. Nobody wants to really invest in building people anymore. So I think that is one mistake I feel that some organizations do make. They don't want to build. Even if you're getting a 80% fit, I would say hire the person. But they
Exactly.
say, no, no, but this 20% is still lacking.
Yeah.
But today's talent market is extremely competitive. You have to be able to say that, or maybe be upfront with the candidate, saying, look, you've done 8 out of 10 things, these two things you don't know, and you should be willing to learn these two things, and on that condition, we are willing to hire you.
Yeah.
So
Very good.
investing in people.
Yeah, very, very good point, Aparna. In fact, one, like you said, the traditional model versus the realities of today has become so important.
Absolutely.
I think also the new generation of the workforce, the mindset,
Yeah.
the approach, the ways of working. I mean, kind of, it's a very, very different emerging trends, even from the talent perspective, that needs to kind of get into the way we kind of recruit and get into the way we kind of develop the talent and engage the talent. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I think that's another topic altogether that one can delve
Yes.
into, but very, very good point, Aparna. Totally echo that. Okay, now we've kind of alluded and we keep hearing about how one of the future trends is going to be increasing cross-cutting collaborations, increasingly in this sector, any which ways with advent of so much CSR funding, ESG, technology, social entrepreneurship, impact investing, all this is driving more and more cross sector collaborations. And hence, like we said, that the skill and the talent's ability to seamlessly work with cross sector institutions, people, partners is very important. But I see two people here who are doing that as we speak. So, why don't we kind of go back and reflect on, if you have to go back and give advice to your younger selves at the time you entered the sector, what would you say in the context of what would you do differently, or what is it that you would kind of reflect upon, and would love to know your thoughts on that.
For me, I think I would tell myself to understand the concept of compounding. You know that everything you can't see it, but over a period of time, that whole compounding effect will demonstrate the change that has happened, or will show the impact that you've been able to support in. It's never an individual thing. But yeah, I always had this thing about पता नहीं चल रहा है भाई क्या हो रहा है eventually, because everything takes its time. The like the development sector is like a mountain, and it really shifts very, very like slowly, and doesn't mean that great work is not happening, but wo- unless I understand that compounding effect, I will always feel dissatisfied with the contribution. So I think I tell my younger self that be patient, and know that there is this rule and law of compounding, and things will change. I think I would tell myself that at the onset, something that I now know and realize.
Yeah. Aparna, what about you?
If I had to say something to my younger self, I would say that this sector is huge. It's huge. It's like if we have to even define the landscape of the sector, you have to go beyond geographical boundaries and your mental boundaries, because whether it is funding agencies, CSR foundations, whether it is organizations working for causes where there is no dearth of causes. Within causes also there are causes. So if you're working with children, you might work with adolescent children, you might work with Anganwadis and really younger people, you might work with children, we could associate it with nutrition or with education or with health. So there are so many aspects to this sector. It's really huge. I mean, I don't think people understand the length and breadth of this sector really. It's only when you sit and think about it, urban, rural itself, there is a difference.
Yeah.
uh, Communities are very different, right? Then there are sectors which causes which are very different, like a climate change, like we work with some of the non-profits, and I'm sure Deepam will relate to it. It's a subject that's very close to her heart. It's conservation. but still how you're working with communities in conservation. Like it's so interlinked, this whole space. It's amazingly beautiful. And I think that's what I would say, that there is really a lot. So first get an understanding of, how things are. Find your own passion and you will find some space for you somewhere in this whole landscape.
Very well
That's
put,
how.
Aparna. Absolutely. We do have a question. Um, I'll just take that up first. What kind of specific roles are emerging more and which old roles are vanishing?
I think one from a very designing perspective, now with this whole, and I think a lot of people relate to it, like Canva is allowing a lot more people to be designers versus the traditional कि अगर आपको अडोबी आता है या आपको कोरल ड्रॉ आता है तो ही आप डिजाइनिंग कर सकोगे सो आई थिंक some of the technology or the supporting tools or enabling tools that are coming in is allowing people to explore their creative side. So I think there's a shift in the way the creative roles are functioning. Um, Likewise, in the content, I would say. Um, but yeah, though that's the one that's immediately coming to my mind. But I'll think over it. And Aparna, do you have anything that comes to mind in the meantime?
Yeah, I think the most obvious one would be like, see, all organizations today are looking at amplifying their work, right? How do we ensure that more people know about what we are doing? And more people doesn't necessarily mean donors. Sometimes they also want the communities to know because they want more buy-in from the communities. So there are a lot of these stories on the ground which need to come to the forefront. So a lot of organizations are working on that front. So the whole social media, digital communication space, where the work on the ground, can be amplified to more number of people and more stakeholders, and more partnerships can be built. So the whole communication space and therefore digital communication is, I think, I would say definitely, somewhere on a rise. The other roles that we see are on a rise is where organizations, where um, somebody who is able to develop systems and processes within different functions, whether it is project management, whether it is finance, because there is such a strong importance on governance. But
Yes.
unless you put, there is a person responsible for that, those data points, and for doing that in a timely manner, because an organization's existence depends on compliance and governance. So some of these roles, and again, like I said in the beginning, HR is a luxury, marketing is a luxury, even compliance, having a person only doing compliance is a luxury, because unfortunately the donor mindset is also such that they want maximum money to be spent on the project and not on roles that are not contributing towards the project. So these roles are becoming extremely important, I would say, in the development sector. At least there is definitely an upswing. Therefore, even without being said, when we see a finance JD, that will have so many compliance angles to it. So the role will not, unlike in a corporate, it will not come out like a compliance role. It will come out like a finance role. So you have to do everything related to finance, accounts, etc., etc. And there's a whole chunk of compliance, which is very specific to the non-profit space, depending on how you're registered as a non-profit. So there's so many layers to it. Just because you've been a finance person in one, say in a trust, doesn't mean that you'll 100% fit into a Section 8 company, because the norms only change, even if the sector is the
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
So these are evolving roles, and they will not come as separate roles. They will be bucketed into a program role or in a support function somewhere. So we call them informally hybrid roles. So
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
all hybrid roles.
Yeah.
You know,
So
And I
with
definitely an emergence of more and more hybrid roles.
Yeah, and I
versions of
don't think
hybrid.
any role is like becoming defunct. I don't think that that's not a trend that we've seen or I have seen particularly. But yeah, if something else that I feel is emerging is a lot of data analytics
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
research. I think that's a space because now the not-for-profit sector is realizing that we're sitting on so much of information, how do we process that? You know, there's like decades and decades of information, but now you're not able to really make sense of that. So
Yeah.
data crunching, doing research based insights and inferences. So a lot of all
Yeah.
of that I think is also
The
coming.
entire array of monitoring, evaluation, learning, research. Yeah. So we do have two more questions, Deepam and Aparna. I'll take the first one. Is there a huge fund crunch in the sector going on? As we keep hearing that jobs are not there, organization is not hiring. How true is it? Are you observing it as you are engaging in recruitment for the social sector?
Um,
I,
hmm, go for it.
so is there a fund crunch going on in the sector? Um, I don't think there is a fund crunch in the sector as much as funders are mindful about what they are funding and what really is happening on the ground. Unfortunately, this sector is driven by a lot of fear of other funds going to be used rightly, not used rightly. There may have been cases, they may have had bad experiences, so on and so forth. So it's not crunch as much as I think organizations are more mindful about who they are funding from the non-profit space. I think
Yeah.
that's where the perception of crunch is coming in. Sorry, I just want to look at what is the second part of the question because there were two parts.
So,
And organizations not
are
hiring.
not hiring.
So, see, it's not like organizations are not hiring because, and I think this is a common problem across sectors. People who are looking for jobs are not finding jobs, and people who are hiring are saying they're not finding people. So there is a bit of a disruption in terms of the conventional ways in which hiring would happen. I mean, 20 years back when we used to hire, I mean, we've had a situation where in one of the hiring, we had released an ad in the newspaper and the whole parking lot was full and we had to call riot police in one of the cities. But now that's not the case anymore, right? So it depends on what is in demand, how many people are aware that, organizations are really hiring and, so on and so forth. Um, so you just have to keep looking for the right places where this organization is available, where there's an alignment. Are they hiring for a specific role or not? I think that's where the whole disconnect is there in the sector. I don't think there is a lack of hiring or lack of this thing. The other issue is that in the NGO space, a lot of jobs that are available are project-based jobs.
Yeah.
2 years project because funding ही उनको 2 साल के लिए मिला है तो job भी वो लोग 2 साल के लिए release करते हैं. And then the whole Indian mindset is that, oh, we need stability. So how do I take up a job that is only telling me after 2 years we don't know whether we'll extend your contract or not?
Yeah.
That is also a problem in the NGO sector because people then say, oh, then, and especially in early years of your career, then people might be feeling, array, but I'm going to get married. Will I get somebody if, will I be able to manage my life with after 2 years if I don't have anything, then what happens? But the fact of the matter is that is the nature of this beast because the funding cycles are like that. And every few years, there may be a certain churn. Some projects really shut down, some projects really grow. So you have to do your homework before you take up an opportunity. And even if it is an opportunity for 2 years, if it is giving you good exposure, which is going to help you in the next phase of your career, I would say go for it. Because if you have a certain experience, then that experience can always be applied somewhere else because you've developed certain skills. It's not as much as about the organization as much as the skills that you gathered, the expertise that you gathered, the knowledge that you developed, the delivery that you made on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So,
living with that.
yeah, there is a follow-up question from the same person. Many time I get ghosted by the organization. I see job advertisements for many months, but I don't hear even not shortlisting mails from them. You take on such practices?
It's a tough one. So, and I can tell you as a recruiter that sometimes when we release jobs and job postings, uh, sometimes you receive 300, 500 applications. Um, at least at our end, we try to go through every CV that has come to us, but it becomes difficult to reply to each and every person. So if I have to talk from the organization side, imagine an organization where HR is a luxury recruiter as a specialist role within HR is even a bigger luxury to have. Okay. This person is handling your day-to-day HR operations and payroll and leave and attendance and handling 500 applications. So
Yeah.
a lot of times they might end up only replying to people they feel are relevant or, not. Or I know of some organizations who are now getting into a practice of saying, we will get in touch with you only if you're shortlisted. So don't expect a response from us. So they do that expectation setting. So I think it's not about the organizations ghosting an individual as much as whether there is somebody who's sitting there only doing this for that
Yeah.
period of time. That is a bigger challenge because the resource might be a bit of a crunch on that front. And I'll tell you something, if you put the same question in front of organizations, they will talk about candidate ghosting, right? So it is also something that organizations face where, this person was interested. And I can tell you, even as a recruiter, and Deepam knows we deal with this all the time, is when somebody told us they were interested, they interviewed with us. And at some point, they just stopped answering our calls. So we have no clue why is this call not being answered. Even if there is, and we know there are genuine cases where a candidate has told us that, what, there is a medical emergency. I'm going to be away. I may not be able to answer. Then those are not ghosts, but there are others who are. So I think my personal experience is people find it very difficult to say no, or I'm not interested, or maybe, what, actually, I was also giving another interview and that has worked out. It could be any of the reasons. So we just leave it the way it is. And in our case, we just communicate and say, what, maybe you're busy, but in the future, if you're interested, reach out to us, and we leave it there. So ghosting, I think, it happens on both sides,
Yeah.
unfortunately, for different reasons. And I think don't take it personally. Move on. You'll find something where the organization will not ghost you.
Absolutely. Deepam, Aparna, as we wrap up this session, are there any other key takeaways that you'd want to highlight?
We actually did put two slides together, and if we have the permission and time, then we want to just quickly share that.
Please, Deepam.
Okay, excellent. Um, is my slide share visible and it's full
Yes.
screen mode? Okay, excellent.
Yes.
Okay, so when we were deciding ki, acha, what do we want to say, and finally what do we want to end with, we had like 4 key points that we wanted to share with everyone who's listening in today. One is the fact that this sector is not just a jhola chappal sector. हमारे माइंड में एक वो विजन होती है कि the sector is like this. So imagine if the sector was a person, we might have said, अरे this person dresses in a carries a jhola, wears a kurta, chappal पहन के घूमते. तो no, the sector is becoming a lot more structured. There are organizations that have clear goals, they understand their org charts, there are roles for people, they have milestones, they are strategic. So it's not an unstructured sector. Secondly, understand the length and breadth of the sector. We are very narrow focused. हम सिर्फ children and women सोचते हैं and teaching and livelihood of women सोचते हैं. There is so much to this sector. Okay, just the sheer number of causes that people work on. For each cause, the number of organizations that exist. With each organization, there's a different way of approaching this cause, right? So there is just so much. And I know while giving examples, we talk about fundraising and marketing communications and things that we hear more often. But this leads into our next point, that there are no sector specific skills in that sense. A skill is a skill. आप irrespective of sector उसको apply कर सकते हैं. Whether you're a medical professional, right, there is rooms for you guys. Whether you're from the research background, there is room there. Whether you're from let's say a photography media background, there is so much room for people over here. Whether you're in finance, there's so much room for people. Whether you're in content, there's so much room for people. So there is so much and more you can do. So we need to stop thinking about sirf program management role hai. There is so much more that you can do in this sector. And the last point, and more like a request or more like an invitation to all of you, that drop that insta mode. By insta mode we mean that सब कुछ instantly नहीं होगा. Yeah. You have to come with a long term commitment mentality into this sector. Then you will see the impact that you will be contributing to. So drop that. There's this pressure on us as a society, as things and technology. Sab kuch abhi. Respond abhi. Everything should be done abhi. So I think it's more like a request that you drop that insta mode and commit for the long term, and then you see how the sector really embraces you, and you will also feel very, very satisfied. And as a last slide, if kuch bhi aaj you don't remember, and it's very normal and natural to not remember so much of information that we've shared, I think, and I speak on behalf of Aparna and myself, that remember that one quote that we want to actually leave you with, that you will find inspiration from others, and in this sector there is tons and tons of inspiration, okay, but the determination is solely your responsibility, okay. There's just inspiration and inspiration and inspiration all around, but you have to be mindful about what is it that I am bringing to the table, and determination is what you are bringing to the table.
Yeah.
That, thank you so much